Welcome to my weekly live stream on Substack. My name is Bobby Umar. I am a five-time TEDx speaker, an Inc. Magazine Top 1 Leadership Speaker, a two-time LinkedIn Top Voice, and I am very excited to have this conversation. We do them every week now on Fridays, usually at 4 p.m. And I always usually bring a guest. We talk about topics of the day that are relevant to business owners, thought leaders, and things like that. So I'm very happy to have you all here today. I see people are joining in on the call, on the chat. You're more than welcome to share knowledge, share questions, share comments, share love and hearts. It's all good. But and the topic today is all about thought leadership, the evolution of thought leadership. So where it's gone, where it is now, where it's going, and of course, it's live with two experts. These are two experts here who love talking about thought leadership and are nerds about it. So let me introduce you to my fellow nerd, uh, Peter. Why don't you go ahead and give yourself do a big introduction and tell us a bit about who you are and what you're up to.
Yeah, well, I'm a fellow nerd, so I'll take that with as a compliment.
Yeah.
So I'm founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. That's a consulting firm that works with all sorts of thought leaders all over the globe and has for 20 years. I'm the co-host of Leveraging Thought Leadership, which is a podcast that has been around for 8.5 years, north of 750 episodes, I think. And as of this week, I am now an author of the Thought Leadership Handbook. So the chances are, if it's got the words thought leadership in it, either Bobby's name or my name will show up, or some combination thereof. We don't have merch yet. That might be the next path that we go down, is the
Yeah, I'm
thought
Canadian, so
leadership
we'll have thought leadership toques for everyone in
Yeah,
winter. That's the plan.
I like that. I like that. That could work.
All right. Well, we'll see people joining on the call. If you have a question or comments, put them in there. We're going to talk, thought leadership is something that a lot of people have been talking about. I've been talking about it for a while, and I don't remember exactly when I first said it. I do remember saying that because I used to be a bit about my background because Peter gave his. I've been a motivational speaker for 20 years. I've done 1,000 keynotes, workshops across four continents the last 25 years. And one of the areas of expertise was networking, then the personal branding, then digital marketing influence, and then I started talking about thought leadership storytelling actually during the pandemic. I remember that now. Okay, that's kind of where it came up. Yes, yes, I remember during the pandemic, I was talking to people, and they definitely liked me talk about thought leadership, and it became a thing I started focusing on. But so I've been doing this for a long time, and what I typically do. This is brought to you by the TLB Club. TLB Club is my tier 3 of Substack. So there's a free Substack. There's the tier 2, which gives you lots of better tools and ways to work with me, and then tier 3 is being a member of my community, where you get access to weekly calls and coaching and resources and a bunch of stuff to help you grow. That's really what it is. But going back to the origins of when I first thought about it, I think it came from the personal brand thing for me. So for me, hey, Meryl, good to see you. Um, for me, I talked a lot about personal branding. And personal branding for me, a lot of people say personal branding is standing out. But I was like, personal branding for me is also about kind of getting clear and concise on who you are and where you're trying to go, having more clarity, purpose, and direction. And so what I would what I was like, I would say, hey, you know what? First, we get clear on your personal brand, and then we elevate that personal brand. So you have a personal brand that stands out, and that's kind of where I was like, and then you're seen as a thought leader, and so that's kind of where I started talking about that in that sense. For you, Peter, what was the first time you remember started like thinking about this concept?
Well, I want to just make a comment on what you said
Yeah,
on the
yeah, go
personal
ahead, go ahead.
on the
Yeah.
and then I'll answer the question. So, um, I was fortunate enough to have Tom Peters on the podcast about 5 or 6 years ago. And before we recorded, we were prepping and having a conversation, and he was probably the only one I went like like fanboy over, right? Like I'm like somebody said to me, he was the only one I reached out to of the 725 and said, please, please, please do this, and whatever. It took me a while to get him. And what I said to Tom was, I remember I think it was 1996, the day a brand called You landed on my desk, the Fast Company magazine that was this thick and whatever. And if you're under 45, Google magazine and Fast Company and all that. But like it had the big Tide logo and it said a brand called You, Tom Peters. And it was in essence the birth of the personal branding movement, or whatever we'd like to call it. And what I said to Tom was, hey, when you came out with the idea of personal branding, in essence, what you were saying is, in a world where nobody stands out, stand out, right? So if I am a junior analyst, programmer, first year attorney, whatever, and nobody's doing anything special, be a little goofy, wear a purple bow tie. bring, bagels to every meeting, don't wear socks, anything to stand out from the crowd, right? And that kind of sort of made sense because people go, oh yeah, Peter's the goofy guy with the purple bow tie or whatever. And what I said to Tom is, I actually think thought leadership is personal branding, like whatever we're up to 3.0, because it's a better way. Because the fact that I wore a bow tie just means like, all right, here's a narcissist looking for attention versus what is it that I can do that's thoughtful, useful, beneficial to my colleagues, to my peers, to my clients, to the business that I work for, and is transportable that will go with me over my career. So so maybe it's a definition difference, but I think that thought leadership is the new, and it's not that new anymore,
Yeah.
way to express our personal brands that is more impactful, more effective, and can evolve with you over time.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things I tried to do is, I use the quote, "Persevere is what they say when you're not in the room." And I said that, you know
Yeah,
what? It's thought leadership brands is what they say before you enter the room, while you're in the room,
right.
and after you've left, because you're a
100%.
you're a known entity and people want to see you and talk to you. And that's a big part of what you're trying to do now. So I definitely try to focus on building that thought leadership. And I know that during the pandemic, what happened was I had a lot of conversations with people, and most people were starting because they were home and they're stuck. They're like, "How do I stand out? I can't go to networking events
Yeah,
anymore. What do I do?" And so we started talking about how do you build your digital thought leadership? Like, what's your presence on LinkedIn
yeah.
or on YouTube or on other platforms? And that's kind of where it became kind of a big deal. And that's kind of where I started talking more about it. Now, I know that you've been talking about a lot. Let's start with the basic questions. Why is thought leadership so important for, let's say, a business owner?
Well, so let me back that up. So I think there's different reasons that thought leadership's important for different people. So
Sure.
a lot of people, you say, well, tell me about what a thought leader is. And they'll describe what we call the thought leader on the run, which is the expert, typically a solopreneur, that's how they make their living as a keynote speaker, a coach, advisor,
Mhm.
et cetera. So for that person, it's important for that. I think there's lots of reasons thought leadership's important. It could be for a growth-minded CEO. It could be somebody thinking about impact and legacy. I think it's a function of your goals, your objectives, and is thought leadership something that will help you get to where you're trying to go quicker, better, faster, et cetera?
Yeah, I think for me, the reason why I thought leadership was so important is because ultimately it's about influence, and leadership is influence. And when you can influence people, even a 1 to 1 or 1 to 100, you can make an impact. That can happen in the corporate space. That can happen as an entrepreneur. That can happen as a
Sure.
speaker. This can happen as a parent. Among your community, and so that's where that leadership,
Yeah.
and that's
So
why leadership.
stay on the entrepreneur track. Let's make an assumption that
Yeah.
we're all being commoditized. Whether you're a therapist, a lawyer, an accountant, it doesn't matter who you are, what you do, whatever, we're all being commoditized for lots and lots of reasons. Well, if you Google the definition of a commodity, it's something that has no distinct value, right? Like a pound is a pound of wheat. I don't want to be a commodity consultant. I have no interest in that. That's going to kill all my pricing pressure, my pricing benefit, right? So being commoditized is not good. So one of the ways you can fight being commoditized is you could outspend, you could be bigger than, you could be more well known than, whatever. I think the most cost effective way to fight commoditization is to exercise and practice good thought leadership. Right. So and I was talking to somebody the other day, I remember it was about 10 years ago in the States, Massachusetts legalized gay marriage about 10 years ago. Right.
Mhm.
Okay, that's interesting, that's kinda cool. Well, there was an attorney in Massachusetts that happened to be gay, that happened to be divorce attorney, and he said, "Ah, this is interesting because here's what's gonna happen. Everybody's gonna get married, and then in 6 months from now, some won't work out and they'll get divorced, and in 18 months so over time, there's gonna be a bigger thing. If I write the book now, if I put out thought leadership now on the nuances or what to think about if you're gay and married and now don't wanna be married, I got an opportunity to be the expert in this space because nobody owns it yet, right? So that was a really strategic and thoughtful, way to use thought leadership to develop business at some point in the future, right? So that's, if you're think about what you are and say, are you smarter than, better than, faster than, whatever some of your more well-established, well-funded competitors? If you're not, you shouldn't be in that business. But if you are, use thought leadership, whether it's, this is a form of thought leadership, writing's a form of thought leadership. Find the one that works for you and go for it.
Yeah, and I like the angle of entrepreneurs because, most of the the people that focus on Substack are small business owners. So
Sure.
they're trying to figure out how to build and grow and build that authority, build that thought leadership brand for themselves. So they would struggle with that. So I think that that's why I like to talk about that. Now, I also know, of course, that you and I both being thought leadership nerds, you have I haven't written a book about it. Which some now that I have Claude Code as my engine, I could probably do this no problem with all my content, and maybe I'll do that. But what I but I know you write books, and I know you have models. So um, can you share with us kind of what is your general model for thought leadership for people?
Well,
Let's model that. What do you do?
there's a couple of models,
Okay,
that we have. One, I'll talk about two of them if you think
sure.
they're interesting. One is the impact equation, because what does every thought leader have in common? They want impact in the world, right? Nobody's doing this for the sake of doing it. We want impact, and impact is might mean something slightly different to others, but the way that you get to impact is an equation that Bill Sherman and I developed over the years, which is number one is idea simplicity, right? So sounds obvious, but you ask certain people, tell me the core gist of what you do, right? And I find there's almost an inverse relationship to this. The closer they are to academia, the lower the probability they can give you that in a short, succinct, direct way. So you got to get the idea really, really simple, right? Doesn't mean it's stupid, but you have to be able to articulate that in the most granular Lego piece level that you can. The next is the relevance to your audience. And to me, one of the most freeing things for me and that I try to share with my clients is guess what, Bobby? You are irrelevant to 99.99% of the world. Now, at first you might say, "Oh, that's no, everybody could benefit from me." BS. I'm like, "No, no, no. Let's think about it. 9 billion people on the planet, do some math. You know, it's probably
Right.
true, right?" So if that's correct, then I didn't decrease your total addressable market. I made you really clear that everything you do is really about that 0.01%. How do you connect with them? How are you relevant to them? What are you bringing them that in the form of an idea that they're going to go, wow, that's brilliant, that's useful, whatever. And you can't be all things to all people and don't even try. So you got to have that relevance. The next is velocity, right? I got to increase the velocity of the idea, and I can do that personally. So right now I'm spending time with you and the audience. Okay. That means I'm not doing something else right now. So this has some velocity, right? This isn't the Today Show, and this isn't Tim Ferriss. It's got velocity, right? More than me
Yeah.
having a conversation with you. There are dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of people that'll get to this. So it's got some velocity, but it's dependent on me being here right now to do it. System velocity is when people are sharing my thought leadership, talking about my ideas, sharing my models, where it's not dependent on me being in the room
Right.
or in the room or whatever. So how do you develop system velocity so you're not the only one doing all the work of carrying all the message? And then ultimately, what is the audience share that you have? And that gives you your total impact. So it's a function of your audience relevance to get you to that audience share. So in the universe of people that are curious about thought leadership, right? What is the share of people that are maybe I don't know have a level of awareness in let's say thought leaders, entrepreneurs that are curious about thought leaders? What percentage of that population, however we're defining it, know your name or know my name? That would be an interesting question to find out, right? That's what we're talking about. So to me,
So now that
that's the
and that's your first model, right? Which is kind of centered around the idea and how that gets out there and people know about you and the idea. Is that right?
correct.
Um, so I actually have a couple models too. So I'm going to share my
Yeah,
basic model, which is what makes a thought leader. So I look at three things. One is what I call the connection. So how many people they know? So the people who are their best friends, who are their broad network, who are the people that follow them. That's what we call influence. Now there are
mhm,
influencers who are not thought leaders. Why?
correct.
Because they're missing number two, which is subject matter expertise. Have you actually built expertise around something, whatever it might be? It can be anything. But are you writing books and are you writing journals? Are you doing videos? Are you putting content out there? Are you doing stuff? So, Beyonce is a subject matter expertise in R&B and hip hop because she's writing songs and putting that creative stuff out there,
Sure,
and that makes her a subject matter expert. Now, there are subject matter experts who don't have as much influence because maybe they just do training at a local community center, but no one else knows about them and they have no social media presence.
sure.
So that and then the third piece is You also want to have clarity. You want to be building your brand voice. Do you have a clear brand around who
Yes.
you are, what you talk about, and you build that brand voice? So, for example, Malala talks about education for young girls, and Gary Vaynerchuk talks about the hustle, and Brady
Mhm.
Brown talks about vulnerability.
Yep.
And so, if you have the influence and you have subject matter expertise and you built a brand voice, those are three key things that you need to build thought leadership around yourself. That's the model that I use for a lot of folks.
Good.
And I know
Let's play model ping pong here. So I'll see your model and raise you a model, right?
I want to hear the second model, right?
Okay. Well, I've got a bunch. We could do this all day. This will be fun.
Well,
Right?
you mentioned two, so like let's just like I figured you do one, I do one, then you do the second one,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
do the second one too.
So one is it's more of a framework than a model per se, but
Okay.
it's okay. So where does this my use of thought leadership fit? And the way we frame that is it could be a hobby, it could be a practice, or it could be a business. One is not better than the other. They're just different. Although typically it starts as a hobby, becomes a practice, and a subset of those people that are practicing thought leadership turn it into a business. But it's not it doesn't you don't have to go on that path. So
Right.
thought leadership as a hobby is think about other hobbies you have. I saw a guitar behind you. So, right?
Yeah.
So you that's a hobby, right? Something that you do, you enjoy it, you do it for pleasure. Maybe there's a certain you have other guitar buddies or you play in a local pub on occasion, whatever. It's something that you're good at, that you like, that you enjoy, but you don't have any other intentions. I doubt you think you're going to be the next Slash playing with Bono at the Sphere, right? That's not an aspiration that you have based on this is how old I am, and I've been playing guitar this long, and this is where my level of expertise as a guitarist. It's a hobbyist, right? So some it starts as a hobby, and then what you realize is people dig it. Like people are leaning in saying, "Tell me more," or "Where did you come up with that idea?" Or that little email thing that you sent out where you shared something. People opened it and said, "Can I share it with my friends?" or whatever, and it sort of snowballs, and it's not intentional. Most people don't
Mhm.
become an accidental dentist. People do become the accidental thought leader, right?
Right.
So it starts as a hobby, right? The next thing is for some keep it in the hobby bucket. It's the thing I do at night, or I do a little bit of it, but I'm still got my day job, or still a CEO. I'm not quite, I've written a couple books, but I wouldn't identify myself as a thought leader. It's one of many things that I do. The next is when you have a practice. Now, just a practice, we didn't invent that term. What is that? That's a type of business that requires you to be the delivery vehicle, right? Accountants, attorneys, consultants, advisors, those are practices. Typically, no matter how you slice or dice it, changing time for money, right? And that
Yeah.
could be as a keynoter, as a coach, as an advisor, but it's time for money. You need to be in the room, you need to be in the Zoom to exchange the ideas, to get the impact, and therefore to get the dollars. And that's cool. Some people stay there forever. And I have friends, as I'm sure you do as well, Bobby, that are practice or, have a practice that is a thought leadership practice that make a lot of money. Keynoters making $50,000 a keynote as an example, or
Mhm.
advisors or whatever. But the next is a business, and very, very few thought leaders get to actually turn their thought leadership into a sustainable business that's not dependent on them, where they could go step off and go do other things, or they're not required to be there. So that's where you take your thought leadership and put it into a variety of modalities that align with the way that your market wants to consume. And by consume, I mean pay for content. So it could be assessment tools, video-based training, licensing tools into large organizations to make part of their training and development solutions. Other things that you can do, it could be a mastermind. So things that you do that are more scalable where the intellectual property, the thought leadership is really the thing, the asset, the product, and it's not just you, right? So it's
Do you have an example of that? Yeah, like a can you give me an example of that one?
of a business, yeah. Covey, the Covey organization,
Simon
it did it,
Sinek.
huh?
Like Simon Sinek, start with a Y. Like
Yeah. Well, Simon started as
it exists without him, right? People
yeah.
trying to do yeah, yeah, okay, I get it. All right.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually take Simon through that model, it probably started as a hobby. He was just playing with this thing, talking about thing. He did a TED talk, right? That
Yeah,
thing caught wildfire. Then he had a practice where all the money he was making was based on Simon keynoting and doing some advisory work.
yeah,
Now, 15 years later, he's institutionalized that, and that's a business. That's a real
yeah,
business.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, no, no, I like that. I like that example.
All right, hit me with yours. Let's see, and then we'll get,
Well, the other one that I tell people, like, I kind of defined thought leadership with those three kind of criteria of the things you need to work on, but then how do you build it? So, when I look at the work that I've done, the model that I created, like, look, it starts with mindset and confidence. You have to build the mindset of who you are and
yes,
what you do. I think that's incredibly important. Another piece is personal branding, getting a clear personal brand of who you are, and that feeds into better mindset and confidence. The other thing that happens, the thought leaders is what are you doing to build your relationships? So what are you building meaningful relationships with people? That's an important piece. What are you doing to build digital content and strategy? Putting digital content and things like that goes a long way. And the last piece is storytelling and speaking, being able to speak and storytell about that stuff. If you are a business or an owner or a brand or anybody, and you want to build thought leadership around who you are, mindset, storytelling and speaking, networking and building meaningful relationships, a digital presence, and then a clear personal brand. And you work on those things, and if you have enough clarity and confidence and consistency, you can start to build that brand. And so that's kind of what, and that's one of the reasons why I talk about TEDx talks because I find that there are many vehicles to build thought leadership. A book, a
yes,
program. If you got a lot of money, paid ads, you could do speaking, you could do a content strategy, you could network and build your CRM or your Rolodex for older people, like you would say that word. And then, but I say TEDx is one of the best ones because there's branding already with it. It's speaking, it's storytelling, and it really is a great vehicle to amplify your thought leadership.
yeah,
So that's kind of what I talk about in that other model.
yep. I love that. I would add to the TEDx piece, being a good guest on the right podcast
Sure.
is a great way because it's fairly easy for most of us to be somewhat charming and insightful for 20 or 30 minutes, I would hope. It's difficult to have an audience. So part of like today, I'm hijacking your audience, right? And
That's true.
you're bringing to your audience something that you think is of value to them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If I came on here to talk about knitting, people would have checked out and said, I didn't come to Bobby for knitting. I came to Bobby for good ideas and thought like this is aligned with what your brand is and what you're about, right? And you did the hard work and all I had to do is show up and attempt to be charming. Harder for me on some days than others, but I'm doing my best. But my
Yeah.
point is being a guest on a podcast, once you know who your target market is, you can say, okay, where are they getting their information from? What are the podcasts that they listen to? Great. Let me go pitch myself or hire someone to pitch me, an agency, whatever, and get on those podcasts and tell my story and tell my stuff so that, I could be exposed to folks that have a higher propensity to want to engage, want to buy my services, whatever, with what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I like the podcast angle because for those who are trying to figure out what's a good way to build my thought leadership brand out there. I mean, a podcast guesting is great. I've done actually, gosh, I've done over 300 podcasts in the last 15
Yep.
years. Although, fun fact, and I'm going to say right now because I just launched a podcast, my first ever podcast on my own, just on Tuesday. It's called The Power of Connection, and 3 episodes are already live and streaming. So that's kind of exciting and not something I never thought I would do it, but now I'm doing it. But yeah, I think if you are a business owner and seeking out podcasts to guest on and to share your knowledge, that's a great tool. Same as writing a book, which you have written books. Why don't you tell us
One,
about
one book.
you have written a book.
Co-wrote.
I've written
Co-wrote.
a book too, but writing a book is also a way to build thought leadership. So how have you found the process or I guess the benefits of writing the book?
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple. So one is I co-wrote it. So Bill Sherman, my COO, and Naren Ariel, the founder and CEO of Amplify,
Right.
are my co-authors to make sure we give
Yeah.
proper credit. Um,
Yes.
so the first thing I would say is I resisted and had no desire to write a book for 20 years. And the reason
Right.
is, go back to the 99.999%. Like this is never going to be good to great. This is never going to sell a million copies. I'm never going to be like, airport famous where people are stopping for my autograph. That's not the intent, right?
Yeah.
That's not why we did it. So I find the way I came to the place to say I think now is the right time for us to write a book is the following. About 2 years ago, plus or minus, I started playing around with chat. Why? Everybody's playing around with chat, right? What is this thing? And I'm like, all right, I got to figure this thing out. Let me go play with it, right? Because I don't need to be the first kid on my block with this stuff, but I need to be aware as a business owner and as someone that works with thought leaders of what's going on in the world. And the only way to do that is to play with it, right? Like I could describe to you what it's like to ride a bicycle, but that's stupid. You might as well get on a bike and learn to ride, right? So I played with chat one weekend, and what I realized is two things. One, over the last 20 years, Bill Sherman and I have built a ton of models and methods and frameworks to work with our clients. And this isn't some abstract, theoretical, academic stuff that we built on the mountaintop. We built this in the field, doing the work that we do every day. And then we realized there are patterns and we tweaked them and refined them that make them more helpful to others. But what I realized was nobody would read, a book of models, methods, and framework, except for maybe a couple of actuaries and engineers, which aren't my market. And it would just be a horrible read, right? And we've all, it's like an awful textbook. So I'm like, all right, that's not a book that we're gonna read. Then I said, "You know what I got? I got this other thing. I've got, now we have about 750, but at the time we had about 650 podcast episodes in the can that we had already published, and we had the transcripts for them. So what I did is I took 30 of the transcripts and I threw it into chat, and they were 30 that had a common theme, and I started beating it up. Hey, give me an example of, tell me a story about. And I was blown away because I don't remember where my car keys are, let alone a nuance of an insight of a conversation I had 6 years ago on a Tuesday. But chat was able to help us organize that, help us find things, whatever. And we never did a cut and paste. We said, wow, here's an example of a thought leader on the run that wanted to move to become a Hall of Fame thinker. And here's the 5 things they did. And here's another 5 things this one did. We've got a pattern. We have some stories to tell. So we would go back to these folks and say, hey, remember we did this recording a few years ago. Here's what we're doing now. Can we have a follow up? Can we have, do some additional things? So now we've got the models wrapped in these really rich and beautiful stories. And that became the book. Now, me being the ADD CEO, I called Bill that Monday and I said, I've cracked the code. We're going to write a book. It'll take us 60 days. Here's what I did, blah, 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 blah. And he gave me the which I only get from either my therapist or Bill. From my therapist, it means, okay, tell me more. And from Bill, it means I'm not committing that anything that you say is going to happen in the way that you say it, because it usually takes longer and we got to think more things out. We got to come up with a plan. So anyway, what I thought would take 2 months took almost 2 years to get it right, because the transcripts on 650 or 700 episodes at the time was 2.3 million words. An average a business book's about 50,000, so it was a lot to get through to make it good, and we were not gonna put out AI slop. I'm not gonna there's a ton of folks out there, "Oh, write a book in a weekend." Really? Really? Like, you're gonna put your name on that? Are you kidding me? So this is, that's how the book came to be, and my hope for the book is not to sell 1,000,000 copies, and my publisher, co-author will cringe when I say it out loud. I wanna sell the least amount possible to make the most impact and money that I can in the businesses that I do have.
Well, I do wanna mention, the importance of AI. I mean, AI is definitely, it's, like, the internet first came, and it had an incredible impact on our ability to build thought leadership. Then
Correct.
social media came, and it had an incredible impact on our ability to build thought leadership. AI is now here and has a similar type of thing, and what I can tell you is that, one of the things I did, and AI is a very powerful tool, and I'm getting quite advanced with it, but one of the things I did was I went through all of my PowerPoints, all of my live
Yep.
streams, all of my training. I downloaded the transcript of everything, and from that, I had, like I just had thousands and millions of words and views and information, and that's kind of how I decided, maybe I should write a book. So I wrote a book using everything in my brand voice, and I got a 27 chapter book on how to land a TEDx talk. Now, that's not something I'm planning on releasing, but it was cool to do the exercise to see what I could actually do and hone in a way that made sense for me. I may have to get my wife to edit it, but that's kind of how the podcast came. So, hey, Bobby, you have like literally hundreds of, I actually have 1,000 interview videos I've created in the last like 15 years. And so from that, we actually created the podcast. And it's basically excerpts of me speaking on the different things that I've recorded. And that's what the podcast is. And it's all about the
Yep.
connection because I talk about it a lot. So it's really a powerful tool if you can get all your information out there to condense it. If you're building your brand voice, it makes a big difference. So I encourage everyone to think about doing those things. I think it goes a long way. And this actually kind of I want to get into another topic because it's kind of
Sure.
I want to get into how is thought leadership evolving or changing in your mind, and particularly Is there anything in the future that you see? Well, let's start with the first. Let's start with the how is thought leadership currently changing in your
Yep. So I would say everything's changing and nothing's changing, right?
mind?
So what I
Sure,
mean by that, um, nothing is changing. What do I mean by that? That there are when I look at someone's work, someone's body of work as a thought leader, there's two things I look at amongst others. But one is what is evergreen here? What are they writing about, speaking about, talking about that will be true no matter who's in office, whether the stock market went up today, whether we're in a recession or whatever's going on, these things will be true. So like going back to Cubby, 7 habits of highly effective people.
sure,
Didn't say highly effective people during a recession, highly effective people when so and so is in the White House, highly effective left-handed people. Those are evergreen, right? So that's number
yeah,
one. What do you have that's evergreen? Number two, what is going on in the universe today or the business community, whatever it is today, that makes your stuff more or less relevant? And how can you make the bridge to that? Right. So for example, I'll give you an example. In March of 2020, so we remember March of 2020 for
yeah,
the COVID, I had a gentleman I was talking to. Um, and he is the founder and CEO of a company called Centric Consulting, right? And Centric Consulting is a $100 million consulting firm. And what was unique about it was when he launched it, because he came out of big consulting, he did everything remote. So they had, the equivalent of offices. They had people located in 80 different locations, right? And they kept telling him, write a book, write a book, write a book, because when clients started to work with him, they would always ask, how do you do this thing without an office? This is a real business. This isn't like you're not some dude in a basement, right? So he wrote a book called Office Optional. Now, if that book came out in mid 2019, it probably would have been a yawn. It came out in
right,
March of 2020, where
right,
everybody who hadn't done it before was going, "Oh my god, how do we do this remote work from home thing?"
right,
So sometimes luck's an issue, right? But
sure,
you gotta play the cards that you're dealt. DEI went through a wave in the US where it was like second tier players doing DEI as a compliance thing because everybody said we had to. Then we had the George Floyd murder, and everybody was like, okay, we need to really, really deal with this at the highest level because this is critical to our employees, to our customers, to our shareholder. And then the tides have changed now where you can't even say those words in certain states for government agencies. So guess what happened? There's a supply and demand shift there. So we have clients that have been typically what would be called the DEI space, where we've had to reposition to say it's in the strategic talent retention space because you can't use DEI. We didn't want to say, well, we'll just sit this one out until calmer voices prevail. You have to figure out how do you make your
mhm.
IP relevant given what's going on in the marketplace today.
I'll share a unique perspective of how I'm changing thought leadership in my mind. So, thought leadership was the main thing I talked about a lot. The big shift for me has been two things. One is that when it comes to working, like people understand, like a lot of our work is educating people. Okay, I
Yes.
educate people on personal branding, I educate people on networking, I educate people on thought leadership. But often when I'm working on the thought leadership piece, sometimes it doesn't hit them as well because what I found what I found is that um, personal branding is something everybody has. Thought leadership is something a lot of people aspire to, right? But not everybody wants it. Not everybody wants to be a thought leader, and so
Well, and you have a personal brand whether you intended to or not.
correct. So
Right. Your
you
personal
always
brand could be you're a
that's
jerk.
right.
It might not be something
Yeah,
you're proud of.
everyone's got a personal brand,
Correct.
but not everyone's a thought leader. But you have to want to build that thought leadership.
That's
And
right.
so I started when I was talking to some of my corporate clients and the teaching and the speaking I was doing, I started changing the word. And the word that they like better, individuals and corporate were was authority. Because they whether they're a thought leader or not, they definitely want to have authority in the workplace. They want to have authority as an expert, authority as a business person. So that word has become more and more prevalent in my language. Not that I'm not saying thought leadership. I still have my thought leadership models. And I talk
Yep.
about personal
Yep.
brand of thought leader brand, but I'm noticing that word is resonating more with folks. And so I've been using that. So I say, look, TEDx is about build it. So I say, land and TEDx talk, build more authority. That's what I say. And if you want to build more authority on digital, build more authority on LinkedIn,
Yep.
and that works a lot better. But again, thought leadership is the main thing. Some people don't like the word personal brand. I'm not. They're like they're old school. I'm not a bar of soap. I'm like I'm not. You're not a bar of soap. I'm. It's your integrity, your reputation, it's your memorability. What people remember. So
But
yeah,
that's
I'm ed
okay. I mean,
but
so,
yeah,
some
I'm
people don't
educating
like
people.
kale. Like, what like,
Right,
you're not
right.
everything for everybody. Who cares?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's fine. So I'm trying to, educate people. So that's one thing. And the other thing I'll say is that in the era of thought leadership and in the era of authority building, because of technology, because of social media, because of algorithms, because of AI, and because of slop, and because of distrust, we now have another thing. I now talk about specifically authority and trust. You got to build both. You have to find a way, like in the human connection, the human edge is how do you build trust with people? And so that is a big part of authority building. It's a big part of thought leadership building.
Sure.
And in the land of this technology and AI, trust is becoming a huge thing. So I often talk a lot now about authority and trust building. TEDx is for authority and trust building. A book is for authority and trust building. And so that's kind of where I've been shifting kind of my language a little bit. But I find it very, very interesting.
Very cool.
Now speaking of thought leadership, someone asked a question. David Jones says, Peter, what is your Mount Rushmore of thought leadership business books?
Well, there aren't a lot. I mean, if I'm not sure I understand the definition. I mean, business books that are on thought leadership, because there are
Yeah,
only a handful.
yeah. So I mean, maybe there. Yeah, I guess that's the question. Are there books out there that you think are good? Aside from his killer book, are
The
there
I
other
mean,
books
the only
people talk
other one
about?
that the only other one that comes top of mind is, and I can't remember the name of it, is, Denise Brousseau's book on thought leadership.
Okay. I mean, that thing of those, like when you think about, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Oh, thought
That,
leaders who have written a book. Ah, okay.
oh, that's hundreds of people, thousands of people.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, what I was gonna say was that you mentioned Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Like, that to me is a really fantastic tool for thought leadership building because it's one of the elements I talked about, which is people and influence and connections, right? So if you know how to do that, then that's one aspect of thought leadership that you're building and growing. So I think that's good.
Yeah, and I think, the top thought leader books, it's really what are the top ones for you? What are the books I'm the only dork, and maybe you are as well, Bobby, that when I get a new book, I either go to the front of the Kindle or the front of the filler pages to figure out who is the publisher, and when did it come out? Probably because I know the publisher and I'm curious. But for most people, there are books that are, Good to Great is just as powerful today as it was when it came out.
Right.
Never Eat Alone, There are books that should just be on everybody's bookshelf because they're important, because they're significant, because they'll help you see the world in a different way. And to me, it's not a function of, well, which one sold the most or whatever. That's not really the point. But what are the books that had a huge impact on you and your thinking and you know, um Trusted Advisor, that book's almost 30 years old, right? And that
Mhm.
terminology, that lexicon has become part of the business lexicon. And I think everyone in professional services, everyone that's good, aspires to be the trusted advisor to their client,
Yeah.
right? We didn't have the words for that before. So I think it's a really subjective question.
Yeah.
Um, so that's how I would think about
Oh,
this.
and David, you hopefully we answer your question. I'll just share one book that I think is a great thought leadership book, which is called The One Thing. And so that one is remarkable because if you want to build thought leadership and you could just have a focus on one thing, that is going to 10 times be more successful for you for your business as a brand than anything else I've ever seen. So I love that one. And so I think that's good. Now, um, let's talk about the future of thought leadership. I mean, so, where do you see things going in the next 5, 10 years when it comes to the realm of thought leadership?
Yeah, so I think again, everything changes and nothing changes. So,
Yeah.
think about the world of podcasting. Once the technology got down to like easy, silly, whatever, and you didn't need to go spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in a studio, and anybody could be a podcaster if they bought a mic for $50 or
Right.
whatever. Guess what? Now we had a flood of podcasts. The last data I saw, 97% of podcasts haven't published in 90 days, which means they're out, right? So people
Right.
tried it and left.
Yeah.
So I think there's I think there's so much noise, and because everybody could publish, and by publish I mean whether it's video, whether it's article, like anybody could get the proverbial microphone, doesn't mean you should, right? Because the most sacred and scarce thing people have today, in my opinion, is not their money, it's their time, right? So I don't mind wasting 20, 30 books, buying a book that I think is mediocre, I won't waste 8 hours of my life reading it. Right.
Right.
So I just won't. Right. So I think the real issue is how do you stand out from the noise, right? Do you really have something different and new to say? And new doesn't need to be, well, the world is flat or the world is round. New could be a nuance or a slight different variation or a little bit, think of it as a recipe, a little bit of different seasoning that you put into the stew that
Mhm.
changes it, right? So
Right.
I think that's really where it gets interesting is how do you break through the noise, right? In a world that's moving so quick, in a world that's generating what they're calling thought leadership through AI slop, like, and to me, be good at what you do. Get that
Yeah.
deep expertise. Everybody wants a shortcut and a hack, and that's just silly. Like, yeah, you know,
I love all what you're saying here. I mean, so one thing that comes to my mind is like there are a lot of podcasters who are building influence. I still don't see them as thought leaders. I see them as they build influence, and that's great. But there's way too many of those people, and not enough people are actually sharing
But
really
I don't
valuable.
even like I hate the term influence because if you think about, oh, Kim Kardashian or, whoever's an influencer, okay, well, what does that mean? They wanna get me to do something that I didn't intend to do. They
Yeah,
wanna
yeah, yeah.
influence me to buy a lipstick or a pair of a pocket whatever it is, and they're not doing it because it's to my betterment, they're doing it because it's to their betterment. They're getting a piece of the action, right?
Yeah.
Now, thought leaders might benefit directly from your consuming and using and whatever their stuff, but I think at their hearts, most of them want you to take their ideas, internalize them, and think, do, believe, behave somewhat differently than you did before because they believe that's better for you or that will help you do something or solve a
Yeah,
problem.
and I think that's a big distinction with the idea of having subject matter expertise as well as building a clear brand voice that's helpful to people, and I think that's important. So that's one thing. The second thing is, because of the AI slot, because of technology, I think that we are not keeping up with the way technology is moving at a fast pace. The world is becoming far more short form. They can't handle
Yeah,
long form stuff. But to your point about building trust, I mean, a couple things come to mind. Number one is that in order to be trustworthy as a human through the slop, we need to do more of these things. This live stream is a perfect example of two real beings. We're not AI. Like we're not AI. We are really here talking, and people are here listening to us.
yeah,
I think that's incredibly important to be able to do because it's live in the moment. And I think live streams are going to be something that are very important even now and in the future. The second thing is the short form content piece, which is the truth is people have really short attention spans.
yeah,
I'm curious how Gen Z and Gen Alpha are going to handle the fact that they are now living in a world where their attention spans are incredibly short. And they, like my kids are teenagers and they will watch uh,
yeah,
a 1 minute short for 2 hours. It's unbelievable, right? And so I think that there's going to be a flurry of thought leadership content that is really short form as opposed to the traditional book, traditional live stream. I was watching Gary Vaynerchuk talk about the fact that social media is not even about followers anymore; it's about interest. Can you
yeah.
garner their interest so that people want to hear what you have to say over and over again in different things you
So
want to say?
I think about the short form in two ways. One is you don't need to be there if your audience isn't there. If you're selling to the C-suite of Fortune 1000s, they're probably not doing what your kids are doing. Maybe they are a
Right.
little, but
Sure.
that's not where they're going for authoritative information. They're reading the Wall Street Journal. They're, like that's not where they're going for the real stuff to make billion-dollar capital investment decisions from some influencer on TikTok. It's just not, right? So if your audience isn't there, you don't need to be there. If they are there, then I think about short form as it's another door. It shouldn't be the only way they consume you, right? But it might be like I
But
look
that's
at it
what
now
but
and
that's what I'm
say,
saying. I'm saying it's changing. I'm saying
yeah,
that in 10, 15 years, are all the people who are CEOs and C-suite going to be reading the Wall Street Journal, or are they going to be looking at their favorite people that talk about some sort of form of expertise on YouTube Shorts, on TikTok, and whatnot? I don't know the answer, but I do know that there's a reason why newspapers are trending down, why people are
yeah,
not reading long books, and so it's going to be very interesting to see when millennials are like Gen X and Boomers are retired and we're dead, and then you have millennials who are the CEOs and the Gen Z's also up there too. And what are they doing? I think it's going to be different, and I don't know what that looks like, but yeah, it'll be interesting.
yeah. I think that the barrier is going to be higher in 10 or 15 years to get that, CEO to actually read a book. They're gonna say, "Well, that's
Right.
8 hours of my time. If I can get the gist of it in 7 minutes, why wouldn't I?" But there's a depth of, uh, internalizing something. Like, I could get a high level, "Here's the 5 bullet points or the 5 things you're gonna get," short form. There's something about marinating over 4 or 5 hours of reading a book over a couple of days.
Mindfulness. More
Yeah.
mindfulness time. Yes, I
Well, and
agree.
internalizing it and challenging it,
Yeah.
and, a lot of times the thing that drives me nuts is somebody will say something that's absolutely completely ridiculous and untrue, and I'll say, "Huh, where'd you get that from?" "Oh, I read it somewhere." "Okay, well, somewhere is not the same everywhere. Where?" And then you wind up, "Oh, somebody's cousin's whatever, whatever posted something on Facebook that you took for granted, that you took at face value," versus it's different when something comes from an authority. You go to trust. Like, when you say something about thought leadership, I trust you in that domain. Now, I might not trust you if you're giving me, I don't know, chili recipes. I don't know if that's something I should trust you on.
Car mechanics. I know nothing. Don't listen to me.
Yeah, right. So trust is selective. So, like, I know to trust Bobby when it comes to thought leadership because this is the world he's living in. He's smart. He's playing in there all the time. And when he shares something, I'm like, oh, right. That's different than, people opine about everything without having, like, not everybody's opinion is equal. Like, yeah, we live in a democracy, but,
Yeah.
you know, stupid people don't have the right to, to be contagious. I'm sorry, they don't.
All right, listen, guys, if you've been listening to the podcast, or sorry, it's not this podcast, the live chat here on Substack, we're here every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And I'm talking to Peter Winnick, who has this great thought leadership handbook that he co-wrote with a bunch of other people in his group. And Peter, tell people a little bit more about how they can follow you, support you, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, the book's available, as my publisher says, wherever books are sold. So that's that. You can find me at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And then, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn and I'm on, pretty much most of the socials. So, and you can also email me directly if you'd like, Peter at thoughtleadershipleverage.com, and listen to the
Awesome.
podcast. Listen to the podcast. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. And for me, guys, I'm on Substack. This is the tier one free subscriber. But if you want to join tier two, I'll give you more hands on tools and access to me in terms of coaching you. But if you want to go to tier three, which is TLB Club, then you're part of our membership community. You can join my Claude co-working sessions every Monday, my coaching sessions, our tech clinics, our LinkedIn clinics, all the resources that we have, 250 master classes that we've done. It's quite as extensive support for you to build your business, build your brand. And we will do these every week. If you know anybody that wants to be a guest with what I'm talking about, then tag me. Let me know who would be awesome to be on a guest every week. I don't think I have anybody next week, so we'll see who I can figure, who I can scrounge around. And I actually, yeah, because next week, and then I'm leaving for a vacation. But thanks everybody for being here. There will be a YouTube video of this. It'll be uploaded right away after Substack. And actually, Peter, just so you know, when this ends, it's going to just cut, but then I'll be able to share videos,
Cool.
and and Substack actually creates these small snippets of all the videos right away, just like that. It's actually quite amazing what Substack does. So
Yeah.
I do appreciate it. So thanks everyone for
Thanks for
being
having me.
here. Thanks, Peter. Thanks everybody. Have yourself a wonderful week, wonderful weekend, and we'll see you soon. Take care.